I planned a wedding in 8 weeks. That was a moment, I think, where my team, we really showed up to the plate, and it really, proved to us that, if we can plan a wedding in 8 weeks, we could build Rome in a day. Being able to be parts of some of the most memorable experiences of people's lives and days they will never forget, and make that possible for them is just such an honor and a privilege. I found that clients really appreciate having a really clear communication structure, like those weekly meetings, those event recaps, because it just shows that their event is in capable hands. My goal is to inspire people to think about events not just as parties, I get it, it's super fun, but also as opportunities to bring people together in ways that have a lasting impact. These aren't just parties, these are memories.
I guess we could start with your inspiration for getting into event planning. So you mentioned your mother and grandmother being big inspirations for you, and same for me. Could you share like a memory or something specific that kind of solidified your passion or decision to get into this?
Yeah, I think my entire childhood is filled with memories of my grandmother and my mother hosting and entertaining. And even before I was born, my grandmother was a very kind of famous hostess. My parents were raised in St. Louis, Missouri, and she famously was on like local St. Louis news during the wedding for Charles and Diana, because she hosted a party that started at 5 a.m. so everyone could watch the royal wedding, and they were all dressed up. And my mom grew up in that environment and very much carried that with her. So in my house, it was very much every night is a special occasion. We always sat down together for dinner as a family. We'd always have flowers on the table and a tablecloth. And I think just, really her love of design carried into, our family and the way we would gather and interact. And then, my parents tell me, as young as like 4 and 5, I'm in preschool and kindergarten, every little girl gets the tea set and the princess set. And I was obsessed with my tea set and setting up the tea perfectly and playing around with different configurations for the tablescape. And so my mom likes to say that she could tell from a young age that I was really into hosting and getting people together and the design around that.
What are some current like sources of inspiration for you in designing each dinner party or event that you put together?
There's so many different sources. I would say, like, I just got off a call earlier today with a client we're doing a Halloween party for. And I just have so many different points of reference, whether it's, going on Pinterest. I feel like these days we're like inundated with content where I can find pretty much anything I want for a visual reference. But I also love, kind of going back in history, whether it's film and TV, like iconic events of the past. So for example, for this Halloween event, we're really going for kind of a haunted hotel atmosphere. So thinking about kind of like the Eagles, the Hotel California aesthetic, thinking about American Horror Story, the hotel season with Lady Gaga, thinking about like the Cecil Hotel in Los Angeles. All of those kind of serve as points of inspiration for me as, I get those visual references.
Great. How do you balance client expectations with your own creative vision when planning events?
Yeah, I think it's all about level setting and being very clear from the outset on, what we can do, what we can't do. At the end of the day, I'm an event planner. So, I am here for the client and to execute the client's vision. But at the end of the day, we're not miracle workers. So, if you come to me the day before your event and you want, 150 custom t-shirts 12 hours before the event, I can't necessarily get that done, or I can get it done with a rush fee, whatever that is. So for me, it's always about making sure that, from the outset, the client has a sense of the expectations. So whether that's, okay, we're meeting on a bi-weekly cadence schedule, or, we're going to have touch bases via email every Friday with a summary of what's happening for vendors and venues. So I think it's really about, creating firm boundaries. So like with my team, I always say to my clients, I'm offline after 7 p.m. during the week and on the weekends. So, don't call me on a Sunday night when I'm watching NFL football at 8 o'clock about your wedding. Call me Monday morning or shoot me an email, and I'll respond to you right when I'm in the office Monday morning. So I think, that's one thing that I like about being a younger female founder in Gen Z. I feel like my generation has really, put an emphasis on mental health and self-care. And I think, that's something that I very much have realized as a founder is burnout is such a risk. And if you don't have these proper boundaries in place and these routines to take care of yourself, you are going to burn out and you're burning the candle at both ends. So I think it's all about, respectful communication with the clients, but also making sure you're taking care of yourself and protecting yourself.
That's great. Yeah. And it's kind of sneaky the way that not even burnout, but just inefficiency starts to enter into the equation once you're burning the candle at both ends and not having those clear boundaries between rest and work. And it usually, like if you're well rested, you perform that much better. So you can't even measure it like in hours. Like you could get done in 1 hour well rested, what might take you 4 hours when you're tired.
And especially in events, where we have, there are some days where we're doing a brunch and the timing is 11 to 4. And then there are nights where, we are on site until 3 or 4 in the morning. So, it's really important then the next day that, we are allowing ourselves time to rest. We're giving ourselves a day off. We're also just taking care of ourselves, eating healthy, getting sleep, getting hydrated, all of those things, especially because, we do a lot of manual stuff. We're on site, we're on our feet for sometimes 8, 12 hours at a time. So you really have to take care of yourself if you want to have longevity.
Yeah. Could you walk us through the process of designing an unforgettable dinner party from concept to execution?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it always starts with the aesthetic and kind of what the vision is from a design standpoint. So when a client comes to me with an idea for a dinner party, we'll host an intake call where we'll talk about, the vision, the aesthetic, and then kind of more of the fine-tuned details like, guest count, timing, venue. But I like just to always start with the vision because that ties into all of the vendors that we will then hire. So for example, a client actually came to us last week and they want to have a cherry inspired 30th birthday. She wants to call it her cherry on top 30th. So I, think about that. I see her Pinterest board she shared with us, and I start thinking about, okay, what are ways we can incorporate that into the florals, the stationery, the catering, the bartending, really creating a cohesive aesthetic and an experience that you're immersed in when you walk into this event. And then, as I said, from that inspiration, I'll then pull the vendors. Like, I know this florist can do really great things with natural produce and live florals, or I know this caterer has some great cocktails and he can do some really fresh fruit mixes for us. So then it's really reaching out to our network and then, working with the client to share those vendors, see who they connect with, what they want to prioritize. And then, really holding the client's hand in the week up and on the day of, being there on site, executing, making sure everything turns beautifully, monitoring all the vendors on site, and then wrapping up with a bow and, cleaning it up and breaking it down at the end of the night.
I imagine your network continues to grow as you do more events. Could you talk about the importance of relationships with venues and suppliers in your industry and how you maintain those connections?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is everything. Relationships are such a key in this industry. And I think for me, it really is about finding people you connect with and building those relationships. And so, one example for me is we have this one mobile bartending service that we have worked with for the last 2 years. Their founder had started her business around the same time we started our business. We really connected. She's also a young female founder. And since then, like they are pretty much our primary bartending service we use. And it's really just because, we've established a foundation of trust, respect. She's always on time. I never have to worry about, any sort of client issue or them being upset with her quality of work. And then, it's kind of like it all kind of spirals out from there. So it's like, Tyler runs this amazing bartending company. She knows a bunch of great bakers. And it's, finding relationships through relationships, these natural connections that happen. So we're always adding to our vendor list. But we also, as I said, we have a couple, I would say 10 to 15 really strong relationships of rental companies, florists, photographers that we really use again and again because we know that the quality of work they deliver is up to our standard.
Have you noticed any emerging trends in dinner parties, particularly in New York City and the Hamptons?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many trends happening. I just think in general, people are hosting at a younger age. I think with social media, people really want to curate really beautiful events that they can have on their Instagram and Snapchat and showing that tablescape. I feel like, I think about dinner parties even 5 or 10 years ago, it was a lot less focused on the actual design and decor and much more focused on the food. And I think now people are really, because of how visual these social media platforms are, they really want to be designing beautiful moments and making their dinner parties look like a work of art. And so I think that's one trend which, has been great for our business is clients coming to us saying, I don't just want to have a dinner party and we have Trader Joe's flowers on the table. I want to really make this an immersive experience. and really have it be 360, as I mentioned earlier, having that theme touch all different elements of the event. And I think, other trends that I see in events, as I think just people are just gravitating away from a lot of the more traditional stuffy vendors and some of the traditional stuffy type design aesthetics, whether that's, the big bloom arrangement that, we have 10 of them on the table and they all look identical, or whether it's using, the same font for all the different stuff throughout the wedding. I think people are getting a lot more creative, whether it's like, we want all mismatched arrangements or we want all hand drawn stationery for our wedding. So I think people are really, again, ties back to social media, trying to think outside the box, make their wedding unique, and stand out in this very saturated market.
How do preferences of clients in New York City differ from those in the Hamptons when it comes to these type of events?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the time the preferences are the same. Our clientele that we work with in New York is a luxury clientele, and they very much spend 9 months of the year in New York and then go out to the Hamptons for the other 3 months in the summer. And I think, the Hamptons presents a unique set of challenges in that you are on Long Island. So you're about 2 hours away from the city. So there is a much smaller amount of vendors. So, in New York City, there are, 1,000+ florists. In the Hamptons, there really are, 4 or 5 that we trust and work with. So I think it's, the limited availability of vendors. Again, the Hamptons, everyone knows it. It's super expensive. It's definitely pricey. So, the floral arrangement you'd be getting in New York for $250, you're getting in the Hamptons for $400. So the cost is another big thing. And then just because it is, these are sleepy beach towns, there's also a lot of permitting and regulations on our end. So you're not allowed to have music in any of the towns in the Hamptons after 11 p.m. So, we have to switch over to a silent disco or getting creative in those ways. Or for example, with beach, if you have a party on the beach of over 25, you have to get a permit. So, there's also relationships that we have to have in place with town hall, village hall, different regulatory bodies in the Hamptons in the city, and having those relationships and being able to call up, the person at Southampton Town Hall and get that permit approved within a week. Those relationships, again, are really important to have and be able to lean on.
What's the most difficult or complex event you ever had to plan, and how did you pull it off?
I mean, there are definitely a couple. I would say the one that sticks out to me will always be I planned a wedding in about 8 weeks. And that was definitely a big challenge. Most weddings we operate on a 12 to 18 month lead time. So, we're getting outreach now for weddings in spring 2026. So when I had a client reach out to me on July 4th for an October 1st wedding, that was very much, unique situation. And that was a moment I think where my team, we really showed up to the plate, and it really, proved to us that, if we can plan a wedding in 8 weeks, we could build Rome in a day almost. And it was also a really fulfilling experience because the reason the bride wanted to get married early was because her father had been diagnosed with Parkinson's, and she wanted to make sure that he would be able to walk her down the aisle. So that kind of, I think, speaks to one of the most fulfilling parts of this job is, the fact that we were able to get her wedding planned and done meant that her dad was able to walk her down the aisle. And, just being able to be parts of some of the most memorable experiences of people's lives and days they will never forget and make that possible for them is just such an honor and a privilege.
Yeah, that's amazing. Could you share a story of perhaps one of the most memorable or extravagant dinner parties you organized? Something from like The Great Gatsby or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of extravagant, we did a really beautiful engagement party this summer at the Maidstone Club, which is a private club in East Hampton. And that was just absolutely fabulous. They rented out their entire tennis house and the tennis courts. We had an open bar set up on the grass tennis courts. It very much felt like something out of Great Gatsby. And just every single detail, whether it was we had custom embroidered dinner napkins with a little adorable illustration of the couple, or having custom matchbooks and napkins, and we had late night espresso martinis that came out at midnight so the party would keep going. It's really about those small details. Those are the things that guests remember and that the clients remember. They will come to us the next day and say, we were having such a good night, but when the guys came out with the espresso martinis at midnight, it just, everyone kept partying for another 2 hours. And, that's what we like to hear from clients is that those small little details made a big impact.
As a Gen Z event planner, how do you think your approach to event design and execution differs from older generations in your industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I was drawn to starting my own event planning company, I'm born and raised in New York City, so I'm familiar with the hospitality scene. I'm familiar with the event industry. I already had some connections in the space. And to me, it just felt like there was really no planners on the market for people in their 20s and 30s who maybe are not hitting the $50,000 or $100,000 minimum of, the large event agencies in the city. But, they still have disposable income. They still want to have a beautiful event. And maybe they want to work with someone who is a little bit more approachable and they feel like understands the current trends as opposed to some of my competitors who, amazing and they have incredible businesses. But when you've been in the business since the 1990s, I don't know if you're necessarily staying as on trend or up to date with what's going on online. And I think, especially too, with brands, we do a lot of stuff for e commerce and CPG brands. And, they want people that understand their products and their unique value prop. And I think, as a member of Gen Z, all I do is shop online. So when a brand comes to us and wants to do a pop up or an event, we have so many different ideas and we're also the consumers of a lot of these products. So I think it's really about having that 360 experience of being able to tell the brand, these are the guests that we think would be great. These are the event elements we think would be great. These are the partners that we think would be great. And just having that understanding of, social media and event marketing, and how that has really transformed in 2024. Because, when people were doing events in the 90s, it was you're hosting an event to get in the New York Post. Nowadays, it's you're hosting an event to get a ton of TikTok content and a ton of Instagram content and just get a ton of posting on social.
You worked for a couple years in Bank of America's Research and Innovation Lab. How did your transition from a career in finance to founding Forbes Functions and event planning take place? And how pivotal is that moment and how much of that carries over into what you do?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was so fortunate. I graduated college during the pandemic. So, well, all my previous experience had been in events and PR. I, very much was, the world was kind of ending. We were all looking for something. And I ended up working at B of A doing their UX design and some research and kind of innovative strategy as well. And just got so fortunate. My MD, my entire team was the best. And I worked there on a 2-year rotational program. Loved it. It was great to be back in the city. But about a year in, I just realized, I missed the creative energy of PR and events. And I started Forbes Functions initially as a side hustle, had to go to the bank, make sure they were okay with me doing events on the weekends. And my first year in business was really working in the office in banking, Monday through Friday, and then doing events for clients Saturday, Sunday. Had, very limited social life, was definitely burning the candle at both ends. But within a year, I had built up enough momentum where I was able to quit my job and pursue my company full time.
Amazing. So, starting a business in a fast paced city like New York certainly comes with challenges. How did you navigate these early days? Like you said, you're working a full time job, working on the weekends, but what other challenges were you facing when it came to building relationships with vendors and clients?
As I said, I feel very fortunate. I already had a foundation growing up in New York. I think a lot of the time, if I was somebody maybe moving, I think about my mom moving from St. Louis in the 80s. I don't know if I could have done this back then, or also if I wasn't from New York, because I had this natural network and background. I had been someone who had always loved going to the new bars and restaurants throughout high school and college. So it felt like a real kind of natural extension. But I think as far as kind of the fast paced nature of New York, especially early days getting those clients, I think it was really important for me to just get my hands super dirty. And I was very much, on hands, the point of contact for every aspect of the business, whether it was having, deep dive calls with my accountant, deep dive calls with clients, deep dive calls with vendors, really in those initial days, doing discovery, building my portfolio, building that network, putting the work in. And, I think spending that time networking, going to industry events, building those real relationships with vendors has paid in dividends because, I think the key is also showing that, their success is our success. When we hire a bartending service to work at one of our events and they do great, it reflects amazing on us. And then we get so many referrals from a lot of our vendors. So I think, really uplifting vendors, being very intentional about what vendors and partners we align with and making sure that they, really speak to our brand ethos and vision. And I think with clients, it was really about, especially in the early days, going above and beyond on the service I provided, being available, listening closely to their needs, always over delivering. And, I feel like everyone says this and it is true. It's annoying, but the first few months in any business, you kind of just need to be getting your hands dirty and building that portfolio, whether it's, getting product into hands or, doing events at a discounted rate for friends of friends, just trying to build up that portfolio and that community is really, really important. And I think, that's why, 2, 3 years in now, I've seen, our community become really strong on social media. We've gained a following. And I think it really is about, the early work I put in that kind of first 6 months.
You mentioned a learning curve with client communication early on. How do you ensure that your clients feel heard while maintaining some of those professional boundaries we talked about?
Yeah, and I mean, I think I said, and this kind of leads into what we were just talking about. I think it's really hard as a founder, in the beginning, you want to be hands-on 24/7. You want to say yes to everything. You want to be always available. And it's just like that is not sustainable. And I also believe that that doesn't necessarily get you clients. I think having a little bit of exclusivity and a little bit of cards close to the chest can also help you as opposed to being like, I'm available 24/7. I pick up the phone call on the first ring. To me, that almost reads like a little bit maybe you don't have enough going on or you're like really looking for business. So I think for me, it's ensuring that I am giving plenty of availability to the client, that we are high touch, but I'm also setting those professional boundaries. As I said earlier, clear communication from day one is very key. Setting up, hey, we're going to have a weekly meeting. These are our kind of standards and cadences. Here's our templates, making sure they really feel like they understand what this process is going to look like. Those regular check-ins, sending meeting recaps, really just keeping them engaged in the process. And then, as I said earlier, setting expectations upfront about boundaries, whether that is, time and my response times. Don't expect to hear from me within 6 hours, expect to hear from me within 12, or my availability. Like, do not call me on a Sunday night. I think all of those things help maintain a professional relationship with your clients while still making them feel valued and like the VIPs that they are. And so I found that clients really appreciate having a really clear communication structure, like those weekly meetings, those event recaps, because it just shows that their event is in capable hands.
Yeah, that balance, there's a bit of an art to it, like you say, not being too available, but also very importantly, setting and managing those expectations early on. It's kind of like setting the ship on course. And by the way, I can relate to a lot of what you're talking about. I used to lead small group tours in Japan for like 2 weeks at a time. So in a sense, it was almost like a moving event, like where you're thinking about venues and some of the stuff that I think overlaps. You mentioned organization also being super important. What are some tools or strategies that have helped you stay on top of everything you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I rely incredibly heavily on, both my team, but also digital tools. I am someone, I love paper and pen, but I will say the issue with that is things get lost. Things, I'm searching through my 18 different notebooks to find something. So I very much have transitioned in the last year over to online platforms. So my team, we use Asana, which is a project management tool that, often used for tech, and I use it a lot at B of A for UX design. So I had, had that prior experience with it, and it honestly has worked really well for us for event planning, adapting kind of that software to our uses. It's really easy for us to stay on top of, tracking tasks, deadlines, event details, staffing people on what. We always use like Google Suite holds all of our stuff. Everything is in the cloud. So, all of our file sharing, collaboration, our calendars, managing those meeting and deadlines is all connected. And we all have, a Forbes Functions Google Suite. And I think, beyond the digital tools, it's also about, staying organized in your just daily life, whether that's having daily routines like, you wake up and you do your morning pages and you listen to your podcast as you make your bed, or, having daily goals, monthly goals, yearly goals. And then, I think another thing I try to do is also take some time, every month or so or every week or so to also, reflect on, okay, what are we doing right now? What's working? What needs adjusting? And I think, all those digital tools and then those kind of moments of reflection and staying disciplined help me, really stay organized, which, as you said, is the most important thing in event planning.
Your goal to bring back the age of the dinner party is refreshing in today's digital world. How do you think intimate gatherings like this can change the social fabric of a city?
For us, I really love the dinner party. I think it's so important that people gather, and I think coming out of COVID, people really miss that connection and communication. So I just think there's something so special about gathering around a table, having a shared meal. And I think especially in New York City and the Hamptons, where life is moving at a fast pace, people are maybe not the most present. I just feel like dinner parties really offer a chance for people to slow down, connect, be present, and really engage with people around them. So I just feel like, to me, having these gatherings can really just foster community in your city, whether that's locally in your neighborhood or at your favorite restaurant or, with the people in your building. So I just think it's all about, nurturing those relationships and creating space for meaningful conversation that maybe gets lost in the rush of the hustle and bustle of everyday life. So I think, dinner parties for me are just a reminder that in this very digital, high stress world, face to face connection and getting together over a meal will always be, irreplaceable.
Could you talk a bit more about how you integrate social media and digital elements into luxury dinner parties, especially for tech savvy clients?
Yeah, so I think, as I said, these days a lot of clients want to get a lot of content out of their events. So, for us, we often have on site content creators at our events. So they'll be capturing content for the client, like behind the scenes, iPhone content, stuff like that. And then we also just seen, clients really getting interested in all different types of videography and photography. And, I think one thing that we offer, especially to brands and influencers, that's unique about us as opposed to other event planners, is that we have that understanding of content. So at almost every event we plan, we have our in-house social media manager taking content anyways. And a lot of the time, the brands want to see, like, they want to be able to use that for their own socials. So I think, we also provide a unique value prop and saying, hey, our team is super young. We're always filming the process. I'll film myself when we do a proposal talking about, okay, we just signed this. Here are my initial ideas. And really sharing the process with that audience for brands and for influencers can be really impactful. Because I feel like these days, just with brand marketing in general, people want to see the special sauce. They want to know what happens behind the scenes. So being able to also offer that to brands and say, hey, we can also create kind of a marketing play for you all around this event and around our planning process is a really unique value prop.
What trends do you see emerging amongst Gen Z that excite you most?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the Gen Z people are very design focused and people are very creative and into funky, into the themes, into things like that. So I feel like Gen Z just brings a very new, fresh perspective to event planning. I feel like they're most about the immersive experiences. So having an event really be 360, not just you're sitting down at a dinner table and you have a nice place card, but what I talked about earlier, if we have a cherry theme, having that in the cocktails, on the tables, in the florist, all throughout. I think another big trend is sustainability. And that's something that we also, just as a company, really focus on. The event industry is so wasteful, whether it's the amount of food that gets tossed, at the end of the night from wedding caterers, or, people buying a ton of stuff on Amazon or props and stuff. So we are always trying to find new ways to be sustainable with our vendors, with, our internal inventory. So I think for us, I'm always prioritizing sustainable decor, catering, transportation. And I think another trend, speaking back to the content and the digital, is also kind of the integration of the digital world with the physical world almost. So, we've been having kind of an uptick in hybrid events where, we'll be planning an event and attendees can also, Skype in or Zoom in, or having events that have a live streaming component. So if guests can't make it, they can see the speakers or they can see the band. I think, I also just see a rise just in personalization. So Gen Z really, wants their birthdays or their celebrations to reflect their kind of values, their individuality. People are coming to me with such unique themes these days. And so I think it's really that kind of creativity that authenticity, and again, the sustainability piece, that are all so important and that honestly excite me, from both the sustainability from just a, engagement standpoint, but also from the creative standpoint of, they really want to do fun themes. They really want to shake things up, and they just don't want, the cookie cutter dinner party that, they saw their parents or their older sisters or whoever hosting.
You mentioned that you had a female team. What advice would you give to young women entering event planning or young men, and especially when it comes to these high profile markets like New York City and the Hamptons?
Definitely early days, it's all about getting out there and getting your hands dirty. So, building that network, doing events for friends of friends, shadowing other event planners, assisting other event planners, just doing stuff, maybe doing a shoot of your tablescape at home, building up that portfolio is so, so key. I think the other thing is to really believe in your vision, be unapologetic about it, own your vision. Confidence is so key. And I think a lot of being a business owner is also just faking it until you make it. And I think, especially thinking about female founders, event planning is kind of a mixed industry, but they're definitely, some of the larger companies are male dominated. And I think in those spaces, it can be very easy to second guess yourself. Or if you're working with maybe event planners who have been on the scene for longer, someone in the industry with 20 years experience, it can be easy to second guess yourself. But I think it's always important to trust in yourself and know that your ideas and your creativity have value and add value. And, networking, as I've said again and again, is so crucial. But beyond that, it's also about finding your people in your industry, those people you really trust, like my bartending friend. And I think as a female founder, for me, that's other women who are carving out spaces in this industry. Those are the people that I'm drawn to. And those are kind of the people that I immediately, want to work with. And I just think, in general, you don't have to do this alone. Find people to lift you up, find other like-minded founders. Remember, confidence is key. Fake it till you make it, but also know your worth. And, after those first 6 months of building a portfolio, you don't want to get pigeonholed into I'm doing free events all the time or whatever it is. So when you walk into a room and you're confident and you hold your head up high, I think other people know your worth and they take notice.
You teach others how to treat you.
Yeah, exactly.
What role do you see Forbes Functions playing in shaping the culture of events in New York over the next few years?
Yeah, I mean, I just think I want to keep pushing the envelope when it comes to really creating meaningful experiences in New York. I think, as we talked about a little bit, we very much blend, this traditional industry with a lot of modern trends. And I think I want to be really at the forefront of making events more accessible, more personalized, and more purpose driven. So we're not having an event just to have an event. And, I think that my goal is to inspire people to think about events not just as parties. I get it, it's super fun. Who doesn't love an open bar? But also as opportunities to bring people together in ways that have a lasting impact, whether that is a founder summit, a brand activation, a milestone moment for your family. These aren't just parties, these are memories.
ForbesFunctions.com is the website, and people interested can book a discovery call with you there. Is there anything that we didn't get to touch on that you'd like to highlight?
One piece I would love to highlight, just for any New Yorkers listening, is kind of touching on the sustainability piece I was talking about. One service we rolled out in the last 9 months is a tablescape rental service called Ours at Yours. And with that, we offer basically everything you need to host a dinner party, minus the food and beverage. And it's delivered by a courier locally direct to your door. It costs $250, includes pickup and drop off. And I think that for us has been a great way to be a little bit more accessible for people maybe who can't afford a full service planning fee. So, young people still in college, people at NYU, but also for people who want to get more into hosting, but also feel like they have, some guidance in that. So all of our kits come with a detailed kind of, we call it table by numbers, where it's explaining exactly how you should set your table. And it also comes with a QR code with a video from me where I walk you through how we set our tables. So that's definitely something that I'm passionate about, just because it's a really accessible way to get people into hosting and gathering. And also, as I said, with the sustainability piece, all of it is our internal rental inventory. We clean it, sanitize it in house. So it's also stopping people. I mean, in New York apartments, we have no space anyways. So if you order a bunch of stuff on Amazon, you're probably tossing it. So, that to me has really been a great part to be able to see the sustainability and knowing that we've saved, at this point, probably, 200 plus clients from all of these Amazon orders going immediately in the trash. It's like I'm really excited about, and definitely excited to just see, as rental companies in New York expand, whether they're jewelry or fashion or home decor. I think that'll be a really interesting space to watch as well.
That's amazing. Well, thank you very much for speaking with us today. It's really exciting what you're doing, and we look forward to seeing what's next for you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, David.